All right. I guess since it's finals, I'll do pleasantries. Thank you, Chicago, for having a good tournament. Thank you, judges, for
Do you
staying.
want to speak into
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, judges, for staying and judging. Thank you, Nick, for being my partner. It's been a lot of fun, and I guess being my coach as well before. Thank you, Eileen, for always being there for me. I like you. All right. Is everyone good? Oh, great friends on side off. 2 points on framing of what this motion entails. One, this is a normative motion about what humans generally should do. So we should look at the median case. You're the median person in the median society with the median income, with the median genetics, and all of that thing. Second of all, and more importantly, is how does motion actually interpret? We are going to say you're going to fully adopt each ideology. That is to say, if you adopt Feline philosophy, you fully believe in it and commit to it. It's not a question of whether or not you can believe it. It's about which moral philosophy is necessarily better in order to fully adopt it. With that, a couple arguments. The first argument is specifically why the contrapositive ideology on the opposition side of the house is incredibly unhappy. First is the basic argument on accelerationism. That is to say, the minute we accomplish success, we become normalized to that sense of success. That is to say, because humans always believe there's always something more and next thing to do, and there's always shifting goalposts, and there's always ever grander success, people will always keep on hunting. Notably, their philosophy says not to stop and smell the flowers. They say specifically to always hunt for success and ambition, because there's no limit as to when ambition ends. Even if you're the most successful person in the world, even then, there's always greater quantifiable metrics that you can always accomplish. In which case, you're certainly never happy on their side of the house. And even if you accomplished a lot, you never stop and be happy in the first place, and you get used to the happiness and the success you get, in which case you are never able to actually reach fulfillment on their side of the house. Second is the argument of how society is constructed. It's important to understand society is likely to be constructed in a bad way. Instead, whereas people who have incredibly powerful motivations, incredibly powerful access to resources are likely to find the way moral systems operate. That is because they, one, control the media, which is the main information metric by which people understand moral philosophy and the way by which society values certain things. Second is that they control institutions, which are generated to reward certain things. For example, if I engage in a capitalistic institution, I make a lot of money, I can buy nice things that make me happy, like really nice food. Third is that these people often have power, and as a result, they want to consolidate and centralize their power. So people will offer alternative moral philosophies or alternative modalities to success are often turned down. It is also important to note that this kind of moral system always creates arbitrary positivity towards quantitative success, and which becomes the overwhelmingly dominant narrative. That is because people who have quantitative success have more ability to affect the world and decide the way that people think in the first place. Why is it incredibly important? It is because, one, it means that you never reach ambition or happiness unless you're the most successful person ever, because as far as there's ever grander ambition, you can always keep on chasing. But second, and more importantly, it means that you are literally set up to fail inside the system. Insofar as you do not come from a position of wealth, or come from a position of being incredibly successful in the first place, or come from a position where you're necessarily set up for success. For example, just being in the median country in and of itself, it means that you're incredibly unlikely to ever be able to fulfill happiness. But second of all, and more importantly, say you are just genetically predisposed towards this. That is to say, you're median in terms of intelligence, you're median in terms of artistic ability, and in terms of everything, which means that the average human can never find happiness insofar as they themselves are necessarily average. Next is that in order to specialize and become ambitious, you always have to give a part of yourself. It's important to understand that society often decides what is successful based on arbitrary metrics. That is to say, an investment banker is more useful than an artist, or more useful than people, and more useful than people who do not generate as much value in terms of society. Notably, humans are multifaceted. That is to say, even if I'm a really good investment banker, I can also incredibly enjoy art. And the things that I'm likely to be talented and most ambitious in are also not necessarily the things that I'm the most specialized in and the most able to access success in. In which case, what does this mean? It means that in order to accomplish success, one, you have to give up parts of yourself that would make you happy based on society's arbitrary definitions, even if you fall into those arbitrary decisions of what make you happy, because multiple things can make someone happy. Two, is that it's actually impossible to ever ascertain success, because notably, even if society values investment bankers and consultants, these people also have multifaceted opinions. That is to say, I need to be a good investment banker and also a really good pianist, because society values success and many different things. In which case, you can never become a complete person unless you max out literally every single statistic. But by virtue of the time trade-off, for the fact that people will always be better than you, because all the time I spent trying to be a good consultant, someone else spent trying the piano, I can never actually rise up and compete. Next argument is reversibility. It is important to understand there's a huge dart of reversibility on their side of the house. That is to say, to pursue ambition, I obviously have to get really, really good at something, which indicates a lot of time put into that thing. The problem is twofold. One, is that people's preferences certainly do change as they age. That is to say, I am a different person now when I'm 22. Yeah, when I'm 22 compared to when I was 15. In which case, because people's preferences change, they eventually end up locked into systems, especially insofar as society arbitrarily decides what those systems are. But in two, and this is the actual kicker here, is that society in and of itself changes and the value of success changes. No one cares what a fucking investment banker was in maybe not in the 1940s, in like the pre-Neolithic era. But obviously, insofar as society innovates, people generally change what success necessarily means. For example, I could have studied computer science all of my life, but I get replaced by an AI that can code 5 times better than me. In which case, you can never accomplish success success, because to innovate is to invalidate past innovations. It makes all your past successes invaluable, in which case, even if I pursue this success, I will eventually get taken out by other people also pursuing the success. And every success I actually have wipes out all of my past accomplishments, because that is seen as the next best thing. And I have the infinite pressure to always push forward and support society in themselves is changing. This also applies to morality, because necessarily morality is subjective. Certainly, there's a different conception of morality right now as philosophers investigated and things like that compared to morality before. And insofar societies are different. Even if I'm in a median country, as I travel to other countries, or as I see interact with other moral systems, or if I pursue success by moving up in the world and going to different countries, that arbitrary definition of success completely changes. Next argument is that to be successful and moral is completely incompatible. It is important to understand that the necessary nature of ambition, of bettering oneself, requires a comparative, which means that I need to compare myself necessarily to other people. I need to make more money than them. I need to beat them in competitions. And that's what makes me happy. But notably, this means that my happiness is contingent on other people's unhappiness, because insofar as they're operating within the same moral system and the same society metrics that everything is defined by, these people end up unhappy. But to make other people unhappy is in and of itself immoral, which leads to a great contradiction on side opposition. That is to say, you cannot pursue both being morally happy and also being pragmatically and materialistically happy. You have to pick and choose. But insofar as you're trying to advance yourself both morally and pragmatically, and society has different conceptions of what is good and bad. That's to say, even if I'm an incredibly successful billionaire, insofar as people say being incredibly wealthy is immoral, or hoarding money is immoral, that is also not necessarily going to act against me. In which case, I can never be perfect, because to try and be perfect in one area, it contradicts off with another area. In which case, on their side of the house, you're stuck in an endless contradiction of unhappiness, which is always going to be unhappiness. And a philosophy that says to focus on success and constantly bettering yourself means you focus on what you are bad at, which means that you're always going to be comparatively worse. There's no way out of it in the first place, especially insofar as people often judge their moral systems and create moral systems in a way they value things based on people who are approximate to them. For example, I am more likely to care about Nick or Eileen compared to anyone else inside society. So moral systems are often created by the powerful to reward the powerful and what success values to them. Which is one, award, that's why moral systems never work out for you. But two, also award, that's why moral systems never work out for the individual person. Because I do what is good judged by the people around me, but as my station in society changes, their preferences also changes, and the people that are around me also changes. In which case, I am constantly going back and forth, can never find happiness. Every time I meet a new person, my moral system changes and fluctuates in even a small amount of way, which certainly is incredibly harmful for me. What is the contrapositive? The contrapositive is the simple life. That is to say, I focus on what makes me happy rather than why it makes me happy in the first place. If I really like pottery, I just do pottery. And it's important to understand that following the feline philosophy is actually the best way to accomplish the goals that they are talking about. Because one, I'm able to be content even if I'm not successful and ambitious. I understand the society I'm in. I likely cannot change the society I'm in and everything like that. But I can still find happiness in the small moments and the things I enjoy inside society, because I know what makes me happy. I feel happiness and I focus on that happiness, even if I do not understand why that makes me happy. But two, it is important to understand that society often defines what is useful in a macro sense. That is to say, society will say the generic investment banker is more useful than the generic artist, or the generic consultant is more useful than the generic potter. But if I focus on what I'm happy at, I'm far more motivated to pursue that thing. And if I only focus on that and do not try to become a complete person, rather focus on my specialties and the things that make me happy, I'm likely to become incredibly successful in that microcosm. That is to say, asking people to specialize in what they're good at, insofar as people have different preferences, is likely to lead to the highest order good. Because one, I do the things that generate the most value for society because I do the things that I am best at. Two, instead if I enjoy philosophizing, I just do that, and I'm more able to find out what is the highest order good and accomplish everything else that they talk about. And third is that even if this is not maximally efficient, it certainly leads to more people being happy.
Thank you to our spectators. It's always nice to have people stay and watch rounds. It feels nice, and it's good to see that, debate is valuable. People are here, they care about it. To our judges, you don't have to be here. You've chosen to stay and give your time and effort to judging us and evaluating us, and we really appreciate that. Our opponents, thank you for a good case and what I hope will be a good round. To Chicago, this tournament has been excellent. I've had a wonderful time. All the judging has been really good. The social is fun. I really appreciate it. GW spectators specifically, thank you guys for, where are you? There you go. Thank you guys for making the hike. I know it was difficult, but I really appreciate it. And thank you for staying to watch all our rounds. I know you're hungry. And to Yuki, this has been a wonderful tournament. I've genuinely had a great time. We really picked it up and out, so that was nice. I was a bit worried, but we made it. And I hope to have many more. Is everyone ready? Reason is a gift humans have been imbued with. We forego it in times of crisis because the painful realization that the gap between what the world is and what the world could be is too much for us to overcome alone, and it's too much for us to overcome in our lifetime. One note at the top before the case. Normativity is not a median. Normativity is objective and it is absolutizing. They have to defend a world that would adopt this philosophy. We are defending a world that would not. Our first argument is that this philosophy is incoherent. The only cats that live lives of contentment and universal happiness are house cats of rich families who spoiled them. The cats with every need cared for, that don't have to fight in city streets for food or risk being attacked or imprisoned by humans for simply existing. This is why street cats are missing limbs, eyes, or have scars. The life of an animal is not content unless it is complacent. This points at the unchecked premise contained in feline philosophy. I don't fucking understand what existing according to your nature is. Humans can't agree on what our nature is. If I were to say humans are fundamentally good or humans are fundamentally lazy, I guarantee everyone in this room would probably give relatively different responses. Similarly, if I say cats by nature do not strive for betterment or cats by nature are content creatures, the simple example of a street cat afraid to be near humans because of the constant abuse it suffers would disprove these statements and therefore disprove the info slide version of what this philosophy is. In fact, your existence is probably just prescribed by the context of the environment you've been thrust into, which is why humans exist in the world in so many different ways. The upshot of this then is that this philosophy is incoherent. When you attempt to live by how you were naturally made, you don't know how to live, which is why, as AR tells you, you then have to start philosophizing anyway. You have to find what you value. You have to ask yourself why it's valuable. All this process is what they defend, attempting to forego, because that process is painful. It's painful to want to get better at pottery or to make beautiful things. It's painful to be an artist. They're the ones that are running from that pain. Furthermore, the premise, again, that cats have some divine nature they all adhere to is nonsensical, and it's nonsensical for humans as well. Our second argument is that this philosophy is destructive. Who do you think can coherently adopt feline philosophy? We think it's those with immense privilege, the people with stability in their lives, the people with material goods to be content with. Why is this the case? First, these are the people likely to encounter feline philosophy in their lives. They're the ones who have access to education and privileged debating rooms in Chicago buildings. Second, feline philosophy mandates contentment with material circumstances. Obviously, it's far easier for those with high amounts of material wealth to adopt this. Third, this philosophy is incoherent to the majority of the world. Watching your community and family suffer, then being told to be content with the fact that your suffering could be worse is ludicrous. The median person can't do pottery. They likely can't do most hobbies. They probably can't major in most subjects or attend a university at all. I don't think this comparative of an artist and like a banker is reasonable for the median person in the world if that's really what they want to defend. Why does feline philosophy lead to living an uncontented life? First, witnessing suffering but choosing to do nothing about it is an immensely painful act that we all have to stunt in ourselves from birth. When we walk past a houseless person and have nothing to give or choose not to give, the experience is extremely cognitively dissonant. This is why you have to explain to your kids when they ask you, why is that person suffering and why are we not doing something about it? The argument is simple. Most humans care about others and want to improve the world through their work. First, you aren't some windowless like Nietzschean monad. Obviously, you have a mother. You have people who raised you, communities which uplift you, a language that has been shaped by generations of history that you have inherited, and at the very least, people who interact with you. Second, you can't turn off reason. We lay in bed at night, unable to go to sleep, because our brain can't shut itself off. For the same premise contained in AR speech, that you have to philosophize about what matters to you and why it matters before choosing what to pursue, is a reason that reason itself is essential to our existence and cannot be turned off. Philosophizing can't be avoided. Wrong life cannot be lived rightly. My capacity to be content is contingent on the abuse and exploitation of another. The way our world is organized right now is incompatible with the way of living that is proposed by feline philosophy. At this point, feline philosophy specifically rewards the powerful. It tells the low-trodden that they should be content with what they have, that they should pursue what they enjoy, that they should sit in their home making clay projects, even though, they don't have clay, but they should sit in their home making clay projects and doing pottery and trying to improve nothing else. Our third argument is that contentment is bad. First, the pleasure generated by consistency is self-defeating. We benchmark our experiences according to the pleasure they generate. When I eat a really good burger, I begin comparing other burgers to it upon tasting them. This is why humans seek new experiences, new cuisines, new places to inhabit or people to talk to. because we always benchmark our past experiences based on the best one. This is why when we get the same good thing over and over again, it eventually becomes less good, why we don't eat the same thing every day, and why rich people are often the most unhappy in our society. Second, consistency obscures. You must see the shadow of terror in the blossoming tree, turning off your brain, choosing to work for Raytheon or McKinsey, forgetting to vote that day, not helping your community when called upon, wondering how to hire private firefighters, are all caused by the type of thought that feline philosophy proposes, the one that is content with your material circumstances, that does not bother with the other across your street or the people around you, and turns off that mechanism of human existence. I think their world is far, far worse. Going down the on case. First, I already directly clashed with the idea of normativity being a median. I think it's at the very least definitionally false, but also rather ludicrous to propose. On the idea of happiness, the idea of a shifting goalpost in accomplishment, and the idea of stopping to smell the flowers. A couple responses. First, you can't smell flowers when your field has been bombed. But second, and the structural response, is that the type of goalpost shifting they're talking about is not the only model for accomplishment. And if anything, it's probably indicative of the way our brains are poisoned, that we can't conceive in a debate round of accomplishment that you are proud of that does not harm another person. If I help another person, if I watch a friend get happy because of something I did, if I give a good gift to someone that makes them smile, that is an accomplishment that I had to work towards, that made someone happy and that cost nothing on the downside. I don't think that the type of goalpost shifting is a necessary truth of human existence. It is a contingent one, and it is a truth that cannot be changed when all we do is become content with the way our world is organized right now. Second, on the idea of people with powerful motivations, resources, controlling the media, and all of that. First, contentment is demotivizing. You're less likely to access change when everyone around you is content. For the very mechanism AR tells us, philosophy is community. When other people around you are just telling you, why are you worried about this? Be content with your circumstances, with those around you. It's less likely that you're going to keep bringing up these problems. You're going to keep fighting against those problems, and that you're going to try to change the world, or at the very least, improve it slightly. But second, I think this philosophy is, if anything, elitist. You can look at our case. The people who control the media with resources, who are powerful, are likely to be the ones pushing this upon people because they know it decreases scrutiny on their actions, and because they are going through the cognitive dissonance of being content with their lives as well. On the idea of people who have more success create narratives of what success is. This first implicitly clashes with what I said above about accomplishment that does not cost another, but also I don't think this is necessarily the case. That is to say, when I feel good about something that happened, I don't have to look online and see if other people agree that it feels good. I.e., when I help someone and I'm happy I helped them and I feel accomplished about it, I don't then go to the media and look up, if I help someone and feel accomplished, is that correct? So I think that we at the very least can feel accomplished without turning towards the media. If anything, it is a media that perverts that sense of accomplishment, that redirects us towards the banking sector or towards the type of thing they want to talk about. On the idea of you can't fulfill everything because you're a median human, I think they miss the fact that the median human on this earth is not well off, does not access the opportunities they want to give, and is probably actively suffering because of our consumption and our actions, as well as the global system writ large. Finally, on the idea of you can't be perfect, there's a trade-off. I think that the endless contradiction that is unhappiness and continuing to pursue the same pleasure response.
Okay. The way it's going to work is that there's going to be a new case. Then it's going to be their case as they said it, their case as it actually is, and maybe give an AR a nib or two. Okay. Was everyone ready? Oh, because this is my only speech, I'll give the thank yous. I'd like to thank everyone who made this tournament possible. The University of Chicago Debate Society and all of the punts I've given to it hold a special place in my heart. You're welcome. I'd like to thank all the spectators who are here. I think watching final rounds is good, despite the fact that they happen infrequently. Apologies for that one. And then all the specific people who are here, thank you for the BUers. Thank you for my friends who also overlap with the Chicago Debate Society. And most importantly, thank you to my good friend AR. This is our second time debating together. Hopefully you feel like you've learned something after you've graduated when it is most useful. And a special shout out to some specific people with whom I am going to be stealing many of their arguments from and a semifinal round of a tournament 2 years ago. Is everyone ready? Cool. Also, as a pretense for the panel, how are we feeling on speed? Goody.
My only thing is, you guys.
If they can clear me, that, yeah, I know that. Yeah,
You
yeah.
should feel free to clear.
Okay,
Otherwise, no.
cool. I think it's important to note that opposition does not have a case. It's important to note that in a motion about whether or not you are going to adopt something, there is not an automatic caveat or explicit belief that you are going to have literally every single person buy into it. It's important to note that if you look at the motion wording guide, Gov is explicitly given modeling power and that implement their policy. It is important to note that at the top of AR's speech, he literally says this is a question about whether an individual person is going to do it. If you believe at any point that this has any credence of truth, we immediately win the round because it caveats and blows up literally every single argument we got from opposition, which is largely contingent on billions of people buying into the system on their side of the house. Second observation, it is important to note that even if it was true that they could just assert that a bunch of other people are going to buy into it, there's just no explanation for how society would form in the way that they are talking about. I.e., it cannot both be the case society just flips a switch and everyone becomes a cat on their side of the house, but also there needs to be some mechanistic explanation of it. Second, there is just literally no challenge from opposition on the model. They just counter-assert their own model, which is not germane in a motion where they are talking about. They can either defend the status quo or they can bring up a counter model, but they didn't bring up a counter model that is germane with the Gov model, which per the motion wording guide is just something that is not acceptable. Second overview, it is important to note that you are likely to default to fatalism on their side of the house. Why? First, I think an overwhelming amount of people have literally no capacity to change the social situation they are in. This implicitly clashes with all their arguments about social uprising. First, I think it is the case that uniquely huge amounts of institutional and governmental power makes it literally impossible for people to rise up. First, there's a collective action problem. I'll talk more about the sellout question later, but they just assert for you that all the people who want to rise up are likely to be incredibly good intentioned. A couple reasons why this is untrue. First, the unresponded to PMC arguments, the individual people often rationalize the highest moral weight to the people proximate to them. It's the reason why, for instance, I care more about AR than I do about many other people around me, because I'm able to far better understand their own moral preferences. Second, individual people create emotional bonds which over trump their moral actions. It's the reason why, for instance, maybe I care about the emotional reactions or the moral reactions of animals, but I likely care about the emotional benefit of eating a burger. Thirdly, it is the case there are tons of off-roads that derail people's moral systems. It is often incredibly hard to understand and perceive the pragmatic outcomes that come from individual actions, i.e., I could do things like donate to a charity and find out that charity is actually doing deeply immoral things. And there are tons of people who are likely to want to improve their own situation. Additionally, I think it's the case that societal structures who are overwhelmingly content are likely to be damaging on their side of the house. For instance, maybe it is the case that some people try to rise up and change their government, but there are plenty of people who, for instance, given the opportunity to become far more economically powerful, live the lives of their own friends and family, do things that are zero-sum. They just assert that there are plenty of things that you can do that are not zero-sum. Our case is that most of those things are zero-sum. A couple additional reasons why. First, especially if you're talking about in developing countries, things like resource constraints and political controls make it almost impossible for people to do things that don't have direct trade-offs to the people around them. Second is the case that even if people do things like get large amounts of political rights, many of those people end up becoming despotic over time. The fear of, for instance, being overthrown in a social movement destroys the ability for people to do good things. Thirdly, there is often backlash to the people who are the most powerful, and we can actually turn this argument. When people are content, they are less likely to challenge when they are opposed. That is, a rich person who is content right now is like, I don't need an additional $1 billion. But the problem is the rich people would always naturally exist. We are not creating a new world from scratch. We are just saying tomorrow, which is the conception we got from opposition, people buy into the cat philosophy. The problem is Elon Musk is infinitely greedier on their side of the house, and it is the case that many people are likely to sell out. Additionally, why is the case that people do tend to sell out? First, people have intuitively selfish natures. They often care about their incredibly proximate social harms. Also, it is the case that people who have been least well off don't immediately become better moral agents. If it is the case that Elon Musk himself could become evil, just because I'm poor doesn't mean I'm implicitly more morally better. It is also the case that plenty of people can have a fear of their own social situation. Also, plenty of people want to recoup or feel some degree of retribution. They want to improve their own social standing, and when they do, they grasp onto it incredibly hard. It is the reason why in many authoritarian states, even though many of those leaders were in their childhood or adolescence incredibly poor, when they become very rich and powerful, they tend not to be very good morally actors. So it is deeply unclear why just the act of losing things makes you better on their side of the house. Additionally, I think it is the case that an overwhelming amount of people buy into fatalism. Why? Because an overwhelming amount of people realize there is nothing they can do to change their lives. It is just descriptively accurate that a majority of people are average. A majority of people will not change their situation. This means we can concede that tons of people engage in a try or die. A huge amount of them sell out, actively make their own communities worse, make their own situations better for themselves at the rest of other people, because it is always easier to do. It is always more morally approximate, and you care about other moral agents around you versus your entire broader community. But tons of those people try and fail. What is the answer for them on their side of the house? Literally fucking nothing. It is important to note that even more so, many of these people, when they try and fail, are likely to internalize a degree of fatalism because A, they believe there is no answer to the moral philosophy questions they are trying to interrogate. Two, just the intuition pump that a lot of moral philosophy is largely fatalistic over the last 100 or 200 years. Thirdly, if it is the case that people are less content on their side of the house and striving for self-improvement, maybe it is the case that we have all the virtuosic Ryans, we have all the sell out Knicks and ARs, when they compete with each other, you are likely to be taken advantage of, because every person who is virtuosic is uniquely likely to be abused in the economic system and the political system that we live in. Meaning, even if it is true that 9 out of 10 people are good actors on their side of the house, those people over time get hemorrhaged because the bad actors continue to take advantage of them. In the same way that in the animal kingdom, if you don't take enough food, people are likely to abuse your inability to get enough food. The result of it is their side of the house in the long run, over the iterations of society, over the generations, over the years, over the months, cats who don't eat enough food tend to not make it out of the litter. This means that on their side of the house, even if they are winning all their probabilistic arguments, people do things that are virtuosically bad. They internalize the degree of fatalism. Finally, all the arguments about moral systems are dropped. They don't engage with the idea that even if it is true that you can conceptualize good moral systems, the way that people are inculcated are uniquely bad. This is actually implicit in the LOC arguments, where they tell you that people by their own very nature are likely to be good. That is what we get on our side of the house. I think people have intuitive reasons to be good, especially if they are content. They don't tend to be as selfish, but we say that the moral creations of our society are uniquely likely to encourage you to be more abusive, to take more, because you don't valorate and venerate the moral agents around you outside of your immediate social circle. You're likely to be far more abusive. This just, I think, uplayers the entire debate. Additionally, I think it's the case that morality just isn't real. The reality that we experience is largely reinforced by our own pragmatic experience, but it's my senses telling my senses it's real. Maybe I think I'm an incredibly well-defined, tight jawline 24-year-old. Maybe other people think I'm an ugly, weird guy who shouldn't be going to debate tournaments anymore. This degree of subjectivity makes it impossible for consistent moral systems to exist. So even if people engage in massive levels of philosophization on their side of the house, they inevitably reach the conclusions, the contradictions that make it impossible for us to exist in a moral life. This means that the fundamental premise of their case is fatalistic. Also, I think it's the case that our side of the house people have the capacity to rationalize and solve their own problems. They have the ability to say, I'm happy. I enjoy the fact that I listen to Barbie Girl when I align logos. It does make me happy. And it's important that as a working project, even if people improve their material conditions, when they never stop to smell the roses, believe they can be content, they make themselves feel bad, and society tells them to do so. With that, on the off case, the first argument we get is on the question of normativity. First, Gov has model motion power. It's literally in the motion wording. That is the way the tournaments are adjudicated. Also, even as the case that everyone believed in a contented society, we just give you a bunch of reasons why it would be better. Also, the rich being far more voracious and focusing on self-improvement and the way that they create their very tightly knit moral systems is incredibly bad. Next, on the question of people who are low income. Yes, we think it is the case that those people are likely to care about their nature, things like self-preservation. So an overwhelming amount of the behaviors that the low income individual does is likely to happen on our side of the house. Also, most people don't want to be professional activists or protesters. It's very unclear why they should feel the more emotional or moral burden to overthrow the authoritarian state. There's no moral impetus for me to do it. It's unclear why they have a moral impetus to do it. Also, I just think it is morally bad to feel like they are compelled to do it. Additionally, many of them fail and buy into a degree of fatalism. This is just empirically true to the extent that authoritarian states are likely to exist. For the overwhelming amount of people who are always going to be mediocre, who are always never going to win, there is no answer on their side of the house. Also, even if it is the case that people buy into contentedness, we think that contentedness prevents people from wanting to uphold those moral systems because they're not as covetous of their own individual material wealth. Next, on the question of helping others. First, if individual nature is likely to be communalistic and likely to be beneficial, as they literally argue in LOC, that means it is far more likely to happen on our side of the house. It means that people are more likely to help other people because they recognize that they don't have to be as self-hoarding. And additionally, if the human nature that we create is far more likely to focus on immediate benefits. Also, it is just deeply unclear why people are likely to help others. We tell you the kind of competition leads to other individuals selling out is incredibly harmful. Next, on the question of things being zero-sum, people are likely to look inward on our side of the house. They're likely to care about the own ways that make them happy, which means things that are not zero-sum become far more likely to happen. Then they say, people have a lot of the individual preferences. They wouldn't become a potter, or some people can't become potters. Yes, those people need to have some degree of contentedness on our side of the house. For the people who don't feel like overthrowing their government, there's literally billions of people who are just so much happier on our side of the house. I think this is just an immediate ballot for us because it means for all the people who aren't trying to overthrow their state and can't change their social situation, they just buy into fatalism on their side of the house. Additionally, then they say, that on their side of the house, there is low trade-off. I think it is important to note that people who are the rich and the powerful, being contented is actually far better. Because the problem is on their side of the house, they have bought into a full-scale hedonic treadmill. They've created a moral system that rationalizes the accumulation of wealth, the improvement of their own power, which means that people who have the greatest hands on the levers of power are far more likely to be abusive on their side of the house, which undoes all of the benefits. So even if the lowest 10% of people are trying to do anything, they have 1/1 billionth of the wealth of the top 100 people. And when those people are far more covetous, when those people don't feel content and they need to aspire to do more, their moral rationalization has been to take, because that's how they get up every day on their side of the house. I think it's the case if they miss the motion, miss the model, and as a result, lose the round. Thus, how to oppose. Propose.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you, Chicago, for running a very fun tournament. It was well worth the try. The social was very fun, etc.
It's very cool that I've made it to finals. Thank you to the judges for judging. I know a lot of you guys, I've debated you guys, etc. And I'm very, very excited to have you guys judging us. Thank you to Gov. Fun round. We had very cool motion. Yeah. Thank you to GW and the other spectators, but especially GW. I'm really glad to be on this club and organization. Everything's so much more fun with you guys. Yeah, it's very, very cool. And thank you to the spectators for watching. It's quite late, and a lot of people should probably it's quite late, and getting home takes a while, etc. And thank you to Ryan for debating with me. It's been really cool. You're like so fucking smart, and yeah, it's extremely impressive debating with you every time. Yeah, I'm gonna give like an overview at the top, and then it's not gonna really have like an order. Yeah. Okay. Everybody ready? 3, 2, 1. We'll concede at the top that it's the medium person, and our model is not germane for all the reasons that Nick tells us, i.e. we don't have modeling power, etc. And therefore, the arguments are just gone from the flow. That every argument Nick gave about broader societal situations doesn't apply, because if it's one medium person that does buy in, that doesn't have implications to the rest of society that Nick talks about. That means that minute 0 to minute 6 of MG is gone from the flow because it's non-unique. Because if it's the median person that opts into it, then the rest of society obviously still exists on their own. And everything Ryan says was also applied to the median person. Our case is fine, MG isn't, because Ryan obviously gives you a lot of arguments why it's really difficult, even for the median person, to do this type of philosophy, because you see the types of harms that occur in the world, and it causes acute harms onto you. You have to ignore it. You have to, think you shouldn't think of the better or for the betterment of everything else, etc. And you should just go around playing pottery or doing pottery or something, or just sniffing the fucking flowers. And this also defeats their morality case, because they tell us that morality is built around the societies around the societies that you live in, etc. And different types of society and different types of moralities. Well, guess and like different types of philosophies and stuff like that. Well, guess what, guys? If it's the median case, then every other, there's still that society around you that imposes that philosophy that they talk about, that has that type of morality that they talk about, etc. So you are still influenced by it some way. But on their side of the house, they ignore it. On ours, you sympathize with it and you accept it, etc. Why does then I want to explain now then, why does the median person have empathy? They also give us a bunch of reasons like why individuals have the ability to have empathy, etc. We think the median person probably does. One, we have a natural desire to protect the people that we love for things like biological reasons, etc. And we obviously just care about individuals within our lives, our mothers, our siblings, etc., our parents, the people who raised us. Second, the possibility of the median person choosing to be uncontented and take positive action. And contentment is what leads to the cognitive dissonance that we tell you. It's painful to ignore others, etc. Because we have this empathy in the first place. This obviously then beats their arguments, because if you're a median person, you obviously individuals you care about and individuals that you love, etc. On their side of the house, when you don't think about them, or you try not to think about them, just think about the flowers within the field, or the nature or the state that you live in, etc. And obviously, you suffer acute psychological harm because of the empathy that we talk about and the ones that they talk about. Cool. I'm also going to address some of their change arguments, etc., change arguments and stuff like that on why you do not just change on their side of the house, because the strive for betterment prereqs change, because the reason you change is because you strive for betterment. So, i.e., they talk about how you like pottery, etc., or it's how you might have hobbies. Well, on their side of the house, you're going to do pottery. The argument Ryan gave still applies. That obviously, things being good for you is self-defeating, because obviously it's relative, right? If I do pottery every single day, etc., it's going to get boring at a time. So when I do change, that is because I am bored, because I want something new, because I want a new experience to fulfill me, to satisfy me. That doesn't happen on their side of the house when you're not actively seeking that betterment, etc. Only on ours can you pursue the things like pottery, etc. Within your lives, even if you're society pressures you to become an investment banker. And it's actually more valuable, because society pressures you to become an investment banker, that you do these things like pottery, etc. And we think that individuals aren't obviously just slaves to the narrative societies. We could have things that we enjoy within our lives. Like I enjoy debate, etc. Not because there's a narrative or some rich rich person has a media narrative that tells me that I should enjoy debate. It's because I find it fun and I find it fulfilling, etc. That's the type of individuals and activities that we get on our side of the house. You don't have access to that when you don't search for betterment. You just exist within your nature and you stay, and that's just it. You don't find any other betterment. You don't find change, etc. And this also beats a lot of their arguments in the PMC about why you could focus on certain things or be the best version of you, etc. Because you do not change to do that in the first place. And also it beats the morality arguments and philosophy arguments because you don't change to like go after that philosophy, etc. And like, you know, to search for the ultimate good that they claim that they get better on their side of the house, which is obviously not the case. Cool. Then I guess the responses that actually matter. Nick says that authoritarian states exist because the overwhelming amount of median people fall into fatalism, etc. This argument just turns, guys, when everybody around you is fatalistic and you try to adopt this philosophy about finding a flower to sniff or pottery or whatever thing that fulfills you or whatever, and like, you know, and you ignore the starvation, the poverty around you, and every single harm that people face, and all the reasons that Nick say individuals are fatalistic, etc. That's the acute psychological harms that Ryan talks about, because it hurts when you ignore the sufferings of others, etc. And they tell you beautifully why society is full of suffering. So when you do ignore those things, it hurts psychologically when you ignore your mother's suffering, etc. Just for existing within your nature or state or things like that. And we obviously tell you that it's just incoherent. You cannot do that. These acute psychological harms prevent you from doing that in the first place. They say people look inward on Gov, care about things that make them happy. This sure sounds like self-improvement and philosophy. Like, that's obviously our argument. Like, they can't just say, like, the motion side literally says, like, you know, you don't care about things like betterment for yourself and stuff like that. And then they literally get up and say that, like, people on Gov care about things like that make them happy and pursue those types of things. That's obviously not the case. And, you know, the info side obviously, like, probably beats that argument and probably, you know, is the case. It is the case that they can't defend just like, you know, like their side, meaning that more people go do what they love, etc. They say rich/powerful being content is far easier. Contentment allows somebody to justify abuses while not thinking about their actions in the first place. Because the reason why, you know, I care about like what I do is because of the effect that it has on other individuals. That's why I don't just like, you know, like drunk drive whenever I feel like it because it's fun, because like obviously it has like effects and harms to other individuals. I don't do things just for the will of it because, or I don't do things randomly just because, you know, like it just comes to me, right? Like individuals and humans have reason. That's why we are able to reason why something is good or the effects that something has, etc. That's how we make our decisions and choices towards something better. On their side of the house, you fully abandon that reason because you don't think of why something is better or something is good in the first place. You don't have any of that. You just do what you do and you just exist within the state that you are within, which obviously just probably means then that they're just losing the round there. Cool. I want to explain then more on why it's just impossible to turn off your brain and ignore everything else. First, obviously, the empathy arguments that I gave above prove this. It's probably like really, really hard, especially for the median individual who probably doesn't think a lot about philosophy in the first place and doesn't, you know, understand these concepts, etc. And, you know, the median individual in this world probably isn't somebody that's like insanely educated, etc. Because obviously that's not accessible to individuals because like it's extremely costly. There's limited opportunities, etc. So they probably don't understand a lot of the stuff that, you know, they talk about like why it is better for yourself, etc. And it probably isn't the case that they're able to fully shut off their brain to all the harms that are happening around them. And second, also note that the median person probably doesn't live in a community, etc. that like is full of like rich people that are all like chilling and vibing, etc. And Ryan's argument applies here on the straight cat. Most individuals are probably closer to the straight cat than to the house cat because we don't have all the things taken care of for us, etc. And, you know, there's a lot of harms around us that exist. And even if we do live in some type of like privileged neighborhood or whatever, there's still harms around us that we can perceive through things that we see in our everyday life. Like, you know, when you drive through town or something, or Ryan's example, when you walk by a homeless person within New York City and, you know, you refuse to acknowledge the suffering on their side of the house, it's impossible to turn your brain. And most individuals can't just pursue their interests. It's hard to finance pottery or artistic hobbies or stuff like that on their side of the house. Like they just try to assume that you can just follow whatever you want. But that's not the case. There's obviously constraints on us in real life because we're obviously just thrust within a context and we just exist within that context. And that's thrust, it's thrust onto us. So we can't, you know, like we obviously then can't do just like randomly do things like finance pottery, artistic hobby. But the thing that allows us to escape that is the reason that we talk about, i.e. the search for the betterment, using your reason to see what type of effect that you have on your world. And also that doesn't mean you just enjoy it, which means like, because but that doesn't mean you don't enjoy it on our side of the house, which means you are stuck. You're enjoying this activity, but are prevented from accessing it on their side of the house, which they can never do. And obviously, you know, I give arguments on why change isn't possible in the first place. So you're just stuck not being able to access it. You cannot change yourself to be able to access it in the first place because you don't pursue that betterment that we talk about, which obviously the info side also talks about, which means they don't have access to that type of change and they don't have access to that type of like, you know, pottery or whatever, or artistic hobby that they want to trump on their side of the house. Cool. Why does this beat all of their case then? First, obviously, because of the consensus of their framing that it's about the median case, this beats all of Nick's arguments on like the societal impacts, etc. Because fatalism still happens on their side of the house, the society still exists on their side of the house. Second, this isn't happiness, as we already explained to you. And a bunch of the responses here are just dropped because obviously the shifting goalpost still applies to either side of the house. Like you just still do something, right? And then like we already give you arguments on why it doesn't fulfill you in the long run because you're just doing the thing, and there's nothing else to compare it to, etc. They can't access change. Only on our side of the house are we able to strive for things that make it feel better. Then there are arguments on reversibility. Obviously, it doesn't matter because I've proven that you can't change, so there is no reversibility. They say success and morality are incoherent. I've already beaten these arguments. And then on the contrapositive, obviously the contrapositive is better for all of the house.
They gave us two cases. One was analyzing a non-germane counterfactual. That case is gone. The other case had a bunch of responses I gave that were cold dropped in the MG because of the second case. They're now true for the round. Why is feline philosophy incoherent, and why does it result in intense confusion or harms for the median person who adopts it? First, it relies on the type of introspection Gov wants to avoid, and there was never any clash on this argument. The fact that even in the info slide, feline philosophy requires you to understand your own nature and then act in accordance with that nature to seek the contentment they're talking about. The problem is the only way to define your own nature is based on philosophizing about yourself. It's not just asking yourself what you enjoy, but why you enjoy it. That is the level at which investigating your own nature operates at. The problem for them then is that their own philosophy contradicts itself, and the individual who adopts it never gets out of this cycle. They try to be content with what they have. They don't know what or why things make them content. They're no longer content, and then they enter the cycle once more. In trying to find your own nature, then, you fail feline philosophy. But second, this is supercharged by the hedonic treadmill. That is, which is also dropped, by the way. That's going to be a theme. But importantly, the reason it's supercharged by the hedonic treadmill is that once you find something you enjoy and you do it enough and you stop getting as much pleasure from it, it's less utile, you don't know why, and you're thrown back into this confusion and this problem because you had something that made you happy and content. It no longer makes you happy and content, and you don't have a coherent answer to give for why that is the case. Their side fails that as well. The individual is again left hopeless. But second, you have no way to understand yourself. This means you don't critically analyze feelings you have towards yourself, towards other people, why you enjoy things, what type of activities you want to participate in, how you can do that. The fact that you have no understanding of your own emotions, of your own nature, of the community in which you live, means you probably just live a life of confusion. You don't understand why things happen or why people do things because you've buried your head in the sand and are not listening to what anyone else around you says. I think this results in a confused person that doesn't take a lot of action and probably doesn't enjoy most of the action they take. But second, why is adopting feline philosophy bad? 6 reasons. First is the hedonic treadmill, which applies to both arguments. The fact that contentment is short-term, it doesn't last for long, and once it goes away, they have no coherent answer as to what to do in that response. Second is empathy. You can't exist without caring about others. They never contested this claim, which means the pangs of empathy you get from existing in a society you're trying to avoid result in more disutility on their side. Third is community. When you're raised by people, you're imbued with their values, you're imbued with their beliefs, and you care about them, it is really hard to justify to yourself choosing contentment and choosing to stop helping them and just do the things you enjoy with your head in the sand instead of making the world a better place. Because the problem is helping someone presumes discontent. It presumes that you are not satisfied with the way the world is and the way things are going for them. That premise they are missing. Fourth is reason. You can't turn off the thought that something is missing in the world around you. When you're confronted with this suffering, it is really, really cognitively disutile to prevent it. Fifth is cognitive dissonance. The median person lacks the capacity to likely feel content or pursue their interest to the maximum amount as feline philosophy asks. Because you can't just make clay and just keep buying it over and over again, or keep buying canvases for your art projects, or buy the type of paint you want. The median person doesn't have the capital to do this. And the curse that Yuki identifies is the fact that they probably did it once or twice and really liked it, but they can't keep doing it because they're the median person. That generates discontentment as well as a wall to accessing contentment. That wall they cannot overcome. Finally is value. You can't answer questions of value or questions about what you care about on their side of the house. It requires introspection. It requires an understanding of yourself that they are intentionally avoiding. What is the weighing? The median person on net does not find contentment in feline philosophy and is left trapped and hopeless. One, they probably just return to fatalism after this feeling of discontent. So for their own argument about everyone around you being fatalistic, which results in a very simple comparative, which is their side makes you,
That if Feline philosophy doesn't wrestle your kidneys, you go to fatalism.
Yuki said it. Yuki said that.
In response to fatalism argument, I feel like that you guys said morality.
Okay. It's
Okay. Under consideration?
I mean, are people okay with me giving leads? Sure. Well, and yes for both.
I don't know.
I'd like it.
So
You don't care?
I'd like to.
Okay, yeah, I'm leading on.
Okay. Which means their side just generates a period of disutility and then returns to the fatalism they despise. Or second, you try to stick with it and you just generate that disutility over the course of your life. That is the most terminal and proximate impact for this individual because we're just talking about one person, which means their life being led as disutile is extremely bad for them and extremely terrible for them. Proud to oppose.
Everyone good? The weighing question is very simple. It is what makes you happy as the median person. Is it because one, there is no objective good. People have different conceptions of good and bad that are changed by their environment. And two, to you, what is good is what makes you happy. It is important to understand the balance in the LOR and why they do not function. First, on the idea of nature, that you need to understand who you are. We give you the response in the MG and this is in the PMC, that you don't need to understand your nature. It is very simple what makes you happy. I don't understand why I need to know why this burger makes me happy to identify that the burger necessarily does make me happy. Even if they say it is endogenous humanity to rationalize and theorize about things. Noticeably, we can find enjoyment in the process of rationalizing or enjoyment in the process of not knowing. That is to say, even if I do not know my nature, I can still find contentment. Second, on the idea of the hedonic treadmill, the point is whether or not you are happy being on the treadmill. Notably, is that even if I find my happiness fades away, I can be happy with things as they are happening. I can be happy with the burger as I'm eating it, even if it's not going to be as good as the next burger, or even if I realize that some past burgers were better. The problem is that on their side of the house, you always look forward. You see, how can I make the world better? How can I make myself better? Which means on the hedonic treadmill, you never stop and smell the roses. You only look forward. So you're stuck in the hedonic treadmill in terms of a mindset, even if pragmatically you are still focused on it. Third, on the idea of empathy, we tell you we can still be empathetic on our side of the house. The comparative that we are process-oriented rather than result-oriented. We find happiness in the fact that we are actually being empathetic, that we are contributing to the world and helping individuals. The problem on their side of the house is they have to actualize betterment. You have to actualize bettering the world and analyzing the world in the first place. If we tell you if you're endogenously content and endogenously happy with being empathetic, you can still lead to positive change, but you do not need that positive change to be lasting because you can be happy by doing it in the first place. Four, if the world is suffering in terms of what they are saying, we tell you can find happiness in the suffering. This is the argument that yes, sadness does exist, but there are minutiae moments of life where happiness also does exist, and you can stop and smell the roses and find those moments of happiness and internalize it at the first place. Six, and also, it is also important to note that even if the median person does not have the ability and the capital to find happiness, I do not need to be infinitely at my max happiness all the time. That is certainly not what contentment means. The idea is that if I find pottery and I cannot do pottery in the future, one, I can reminisce on the memories of when I did pottery, be happy and content that I was able to do this in the first place. Yeah.
Memory reminiscing, I think, is a new response to the LOC argument.
Wait, sorry. AR is just saying smell, but like he's just saying you can enjoy the things you enjoy.
Wait, but
The words I heard him say were memory and reminiscing. That's memory.
yeah, like that you could reminisce on the time when you were content.
Like, I think, okay, the argument in the PMC is certainly about like stopping and realizing what happened and looking at the small moments of happiness in your life. I think this is just the argument.
So I'm leaning Wilson, and I think being happy with the memories is distinct from solving the smelling versus.
Okay.
But obviously, if the panel disagrees, we'll
Yeah,
discuss
yeah.
about it.
And notably, even if I am not infinitely in my max happiness all the time, even if I can no longer pursue pottery, there are certainly other things that make me happy, given that humans are multifaceted people, and there are many things that humans can do to give them happiness, like the interpersonal relations I created. Notably, on their side of the house, insofar as you are focused on betterment, if you don't have the access and the capital to access that betterment on their side of the house, insofar as you can never achieve that, you're stuck in a permanent state of unhappiness. And finally, on the argument about fatalism, it is important to understand the new MO argument is very simple. They say you return to fatalism after you realize that you cannot change the world and everything like that. The problem is that on their side of the house, you start at fatalism because you rationalize how can I better the world, and you realize you can't because the powers that be do not allow you to do so because the rich and powerful constantly take. In which case, even if you return to fatalism, at least on our side of the house, some part of your life is not in fatalism. So you have comparatively more happiness and content. We say that even if you live in a mirage, it is better to have some degree of happiness than no degree of happiness at all. And notably, on their side of the house, if you are the median person and you want to be better and you want to better the world because you're incredibly empathetic, you are just absolutely fucked. We tell you that one, the rich people control the moral system. They're the ones who took everything and they tell you what is good. And humans do not just arrive at morality randomly. They are told by the media what is good. They're told what to quantitatively want, and they're given reward systems that tell them what is good and not good. But the problem is that empathy contradicts with what the rich do because those who control and those who are not empathetic are the ones who control society. So what does this mean? You live your life in infinite contradiction because your idea of personal success and betterment is defined by those above you. But to do that means that you have to be unempathetic. So on their side of the house, you can never be who you are, but you can also never achieve more, and you fail at both in the hedonic treadmill. Second, they say in the MO, oh, you can't be content because things are bad. Notably, we tell you that we are caveating you adopt it. So we caveat you still find contentment in daily life. And notably, you can be able to accept your life. Yeah.
I think this is a new argument, most likely generated from misunderstanding my argument. I'm still going to call it new. The idea that they caveated you can adopt feline philosophy is a reason why you can't feel content having adopted feline philosophy is a new response.
All right, feline philosophy is contentment with yourself and the way the world is. That's the definition in the motion slide. Like there's also like more whatever.
So can you restate your point?
So what I'm trying to do is the idea that because we claim that over time it is impossible to feel content under feline philosophy, the idea that, oh, because feline philosophy is contentment and they mandated you adopt it is responsive to that, I think is a new response to my argument.
Yeah, a couple of things here. First, AI is repeating caveat with Christianity, which is you believe the ideology of feline philosophy that you are content. Two is the argument in the energy that even iterative repeatable processes, people can very easily rationalize and making them happy. This is the Barbie girl law aligning Royals argument for energy. AI is just pulling it through.
One of those will.
That's
Repeat the second one, then.
the Barbie girl argument from energy.
I didn't pull the bar. You're gonna have to give the words themselves.
Yeah, no. The argument is if you have bought into feline philosophy, you rationalize your life as content, so you can just buy into it. And also I'm extending it. AR is extending the you buy into contentment, which is what the info slide says, which is copy to years. Like, of course, it's cross application, but also the explicit argument is just full.
I'm leaning well taken, but I think this is probably something we're going to talk about in the future. But
Also, humans can rationalize the world as they are given and internally rationalize what the world means to them. This is the argument in the PMC and how different philosophies function. So even if the world is bad, you can convince yourself and rationalize to focus on the good and ignore the bad. We tell you that you can be able to accept your life. And even if you are right to make the world better, you will fail on their side of the house because you can't. Because those who want to make it worse hold everything. And the collective action problem that no one wants to work together in order to make the world better because everyone is focused on the people around them. So we tell you to focus on the trying, to focus on the benefits that come from individual actions of empathy, rather than knowing that you're throwing everything into a system that will never succeed, to benefit from the small interactions in life, the little ways you make the world better, even if you cannot structurally make the world better, because you see how you make it better right now, rather than focusing how you will never be able to make it better in the future, to be happy with the process despite failure, because the stray cat can never become a house cat. It is better to accept that life is suffering and to focus on the moments of non-suffering, rather than accept the fact that rather than focus on trying to get into the house in the first place. The LOC argument that people are different is the ballad. It is because people are different that when you focus on what is making you happy, you necessarily are creating differing forms of value. The default state of human existence is not sitting still and not reasoning. Even if you're content doing what you are doing. We will still live our lives. We do not need to stay still. Some people want to be lazy and that's okay, but some people want to code. Some people want to be an investment banker. Some people want to be a potter, and some people want to philosophize. And enjoying the process of reason is good, rather than reasoning yourself into fatalism and only focusing on the end goal can never be successful. The difference is that there's no objective standard of goodness. To define ambition and betterment requires a comparative, which is impossible to accomplish. And on their side of the house, the comparative is defined by those who are powerful, those who took everything, in which case you are coerced categorically as the median person into a life you do not want to do. On their side of the house, you run on the hedonic treadmill and you are told to make the world worse, but you do not want to make the world worse. On our side of the house, we make the world better. Proud to propose.